Of the day this morning, we're asking you about your confidence in our state security agencies. Well, to tell you more about the story and where the question derives from, the Democratic Alliance has submitted parliamentary questions to the State Security Minister Ayanda Dlodlo, asking her to examine the extent to which the country's security has been compromised. Now, an undisclosed amount of money and sensitive documents were stolen from the State Security Agency offices recently, and this is the second reported robbery at the State Security Agency in 5 years after the theft of millions of rands in December of 2015. Now, to discuss this further, we're joined by Thami Nkosi from the Right2Know Campaign, and Thami joins us from our Sea Point studios in Cape Town. Thami, good morning. Thanks for coming through to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers at home, and thank you for having us.
Thami, let's start here. So what do you make of this robbery? It's the second in 5 years. The Hawk saying that there does not seem to be any false entry onto the premises or the offices. So what do you make of all of this?
Look, I think it's another episode in the Spy Wars. It's a soap opera unfolding in there. Part of the problem for us is simply to say that building in itself is a high-tech security building, and it raises serious questions about, how much of perhaps an inside job this was, and for what end was this actually being done. So for us, it's a very problematic situation, primarily because we know the state security has been compromised for a couple of years now, and it raises serious questions with regards to if we can't secure the safety of the documentation that is actually kept in the safe in the offices itself, what does then that therefore mean? If people can easily access, whether through being aided by workers inside or whichever way that this happened, primarily because there was no known break-in. So for us, it's a very concerning situation, primarily to say there is massive leak of information that is actually making out into the public hands and perhaps into crooks' hands, and we don't know to what ends is this being used for.
But are we not able to narrow this down, given that we know that this is a national key point? We know that there's security not just on the perimeter, on the premises, but on that very floor where the break-in and entry to the safe was gained. So what does this tell us about the country's intelligence and security by extension?
Look, I think it raises serious questions to say, there is something horribly wrong with that institution in itself. But we must remember again to say that there's also a political game that is unfolding there, for the fact that the State Security Agency had been infiltrated by a couple of agents that were in there, instituted primarily to fight political battles, and as a result, use the State Security Agency for pervasive reasons. So for us, it raises serious questions to simply say, how much do we know about whether there is some politicization still that exists within the State Security Agency, and is this a fight back from a particular, group of people, or a particular faction, to simply actually, steal some certain documents to stage a particular fight back from within? Because we know that the State Security Agency, even in its reform efforts that have been conducting so far, not everybody that had been fingered, even in the in the high-level panel report on the state security, has actually left the agency. So are these people still within the agency to simply then stage a fight back internally, and as a result weaken the State Security Agency and continue with the factional battles that we have seen unfold within the State Security Agency? So it's not necessarily a case of pure criminality, but it was also the political, factional battles that have been unfolding in there. And to what end or to what degree are this related even to that? Because, for a fact that this is a national key point and it has the high-tech security, how is it is that easy for people to walk in there? I mean, CCTV cameras ceased to function at the very moment that, these documents and this money went missing, after we had lost about 17 million in 2015. So clearly something is horribly wrong in there, and some people are being aided for whatever reasons, to actually get access to this documentation, whether it's a political fight back within the factions that had been in the State Security Agency, whether it's pure criminality, it remains to be seen. But hopefully the investigation can shed some light with regards to what precisely is going on in there. But we should be worried as a public to simply say, one of the most secure buildings in this country, people gain access to it without even breaking a sweat.
Well, the Democratic Alliance have, of course, put this question to the minister to be answered in Parliament. They allege that these two incidents that we are talking about are the two reported break-ins, but they seem to allege that there may have been others that could perhaps not have been reported, other break-ins that is. And what should the minister do? What should Minister Dlodlo do as a matter of urgency following these incidents? Because one has to wonder whether the right questions are being asked. If a security guard who is meant to be on duty mysteriously is not at their post on the very same day, at the very same time when this break-in happens, when the CCTV footage is removed, everything seems to point to an inside job. So what should the minister do?
I think one of the biggest questions for us is to simply say, look, we know the State Security Agency has been off limits with regards to how much information they share in the public. So in as much as I appreciate the DEA's concerns to say there has been other break-ins that have not necessarily been reported, I think one of the things is for the minister to actually take responsibility in accepting the fact that, look, we have a problem in our hands, and there has been other break-ins that have been there, not necessarily disclosed with regards to what is it that was stolen at the time, but just to give us the magnitude of what the problem is, because then it's a worrying sign if you have a series of break-ins that happen within the State Security Agency. So perhaps it's for the minister to come forth with that kind of information to simply say, look, we've had a number of break-ins. As a result, we've lost a number of documentations, not necessarily even tell us exactly what those documentations contained. But I think this is a moment where the minister can actually at least win back the public confidence by being honest about what exactly is happening within the State Security Agency, and not necessarily give away, the intelligence gathering methods and every other thing, but just to simply say, look, we have a State Security Agency that is embedded in problems. We have break-ins that are constantly happening in there, and we're trying to get to the bottom of this. And unfortunately, it then therefore requires that there is a thorough investigation that is done internally. There should be a forensic, investigation that is done internally to say who is aiding all these break-ins, if that's the case, because there's a security guard that's not at their post when they're supposed to be there at the post. It can't be just a coincidence. So there needs to be a forensic investigation that is actually conducted within state security to get to the bottom of this. It can't be business as usual to simply say, well, it was just another break-in, it was a criminal element, when we know that the State Security Agency has been at the height of political, battles and political factional battles that were happening, and it became a very highly politicized institution. So have we gotten rid of the people that were actually in there, installed to fight these political battles? That's another question that we need to have a conversation about. So for me, the minister, or for us, the minister should actually come out in the open and simply say, look, we've had a series of break-ins, and we've lost, some sensitive documentation. As a result, this is a worrying factor. Perhaps we need to upgrade our security. Perhaps we need to conduct an investigation internally, a forensic one, to simply look at our security mechanisms and to also look at possible aiders within the State Security Agency that are actually enablers of these break-ins to actually happen. So in as much as we appreciate the DA actually making that assertion, it also points to the minister coming out and saying it to the public to also gain the public confidence, because you must remember this is a ministry that has lost a lot of public confidence, and this would be one of the key things to do to gain back the public confidence into the institution itself.
Well, the institution hasn't only lost public confidence, they've also lost a lot of money from the public purse, because you've alluded to the State Security Agency being used as a tool for political point scoring, but it's also been the site of unrestrained looting. We think about Jacques Pauw's book and what is detailed therein, the 17 million that you alluded to that was stolen from the agency's officers 5 years ago. Again, at this point, we're told an undisclosed amount of money stolen. So how does that factor into the wrangling at the top in this institution?
Look, I think, Sakina, the other thing that I think we having put pressure on the presidency to release the high-level panel on the happenings within state security in 2019, one of the things that we should be doing following up now is to simply say we need to have some progress report with how far the reforms that were initiated, with the recommendations that were given by the high-level panel headed by Sydney Mufumadi. How far have we gone in implementing the recommendations of that? Because part of the recommendations was actually looking at a top-down, systematic reforms that were necessary to actually rid the state security agency of all the rogue elements and actually all the wrong, or the criminal elements that were actually besieging the agency itself. So I think this is the right time also for the minister to take us into her confidence and simply say, look, and as far as the state security reforms that were initiated by the high-level panel, this is how far we have gone to try and actually clean house. And essentially, this is how far we would need to still do to be able to clean in-house. So it's not only about the looting that actually essentially happens that looks like criminality, but it's also about how much the state security agency itself has taken heed to the recommendations of the high-level panel to ensure that they institute all kinds of reforms that were actually recommended in the report. Because you're thinking about things like matters related to people like Thulani Dlomo. What has happened to Thulani Dlomo, right? The minister came out and said, well, he was fired from the agency. He has a contrary statement to say in saying he's going to fight tooth and nails to get his job back. And this is one character that was central to the Zuma era with regards to establishing the rogue unit that's called the Special Operations Unit. And part of the problem is that how much have we done, or how much has the State Security Agency, how much has the minister instituted the reforms that were suggested by the high-level panel in ensuring that the recommendations of it is actually implemented to get rid of all these elements that were criminal inside the agency, and also were pushing political battles within the state agency. So there's a bigger question about the reform that was suggested by the high-level panel, and the minister taking us into confidence and giving us a progress report of how far they've gone in implementing these recommendations.
Well, Thami Nkosi, thank you so much. Thami Nkosi is from the Right2Know Campaign, talking to us about the state of the country's security and intelligence following a second burglary at the State Security Agency offices. We're taking a break.